Hello, my name is Bill. In this video I'll continue with my shelf tour. So, The Social Contract by Rousseau. Man was born free and he is everywhere in chains. So Rousseau lived from 1712 to 1778. And this version was translated by Maurice Cranston. Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained by John Milton. So, Paradise Lost was published in 1667, and Paradise Regained was 4 years later. The Oxbow Incident by Walter van Tilburg Clark. So I read this one in English class for back in the early 70s. So this was copyright 1940. Hackers by Stephen Levy. So I was thinking I read this book, but maybe I haven't yet. Copyright 1984. So it looks brand new. Bought it back in the 80s. I read lots of books of this type in the 80s. Heart of Darkness and the Secret Share by Joseph Conrad. So I read the Heart of Darkness in the early 70s. And just a few months ago I got the introduction read, but didn't get any more of this read. So there must be a copyright date here somewhere. Introduction 1997. So I don't see any date for Heart of Darkness. It says first signet printing in 1950. So it was written a while ago. Arrowsmith by Sinclair Lewis. So I read this one in the early 70s. About somebody learning science and how to be a doctor. That's about as much as I remember. Copyright 1924. There's a whole bunch of copyright dates, but 1924 is the oldest one I see. The Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins. So I started reading this several years ago, but kept putting me to sleep. He assumes that you didn't make it through science class in junior high school, so you better make sure you know all the details. Copyright 1986. These next two I've found in a shopping cart in the parking lot for the grocery store. Somebody, when they put their groceries in their car, missed these two books. Two Kinds of Truth by Michael Connelly. I was thinking I should leave them in case they come back looking for them, but then I thought, oh, somebody else will just take them, so I might as well take them. 2017. The other one was The People versus Alex Cross by James Patterson. I've never read of James Patterson. So now he puts out several books a year by getting other people to write them for him, but now he'll probably start using AI because it costs money to hire other writers. So, 2017. We and that must be a Russian name that I have no idea how to pronounce. A new translation with an introduction by Natasha Randall. Foreword by Bruce Sterling. So the translation is copyright 2006. So the author lived from 1884 to 1937. But it doesn't say when he first published this. Well, it says written in 1921. My computer says it has performance issues. "20,000 Leagues Under the Sea" by Jules Verne. So I read this in early 70s. Then I read this copy again maybe a year or two ago. So it doesn't say when Jules Verne wrote it here. So Jules Verne is considered one of the fathers of science fiction. He was a prominent and influential author of the late 19th century. His published works include Journey to the Center of the Earth, 1864. So 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was 1870. Round the World in 80 Days, 1873. and The Mysterious Island, 1874. He died in 1905. So from what I've heard is all the original translations into English are heavily modified. Large pieces left out. They wouldn't want to put any of the French ideas in that would offend English and American readers. So if you're planning on reading Jules Verne, look for modern translations but there probably isn't modern translations of very many of his works. The Secret Garden. By Francis Hodgson Burnett. So I read this, I guess is around 1965. The librarian told me I wasn't old enough for this book, but I took it home and read it anyway. And I just read it again a couple of years ago. It was a lot more mysterious the first time I read it. Now, as an old man, it seems like a pretty simple story. The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane. So as far as I know, I've never read this. But I was reading everything I could find in the school library in the late 60s and early 70s. So they put such small print here I can't see anything. What? First published 1895. I probably didn't get the date for this one. (1911). Copyright renewed 1938. Illustrations 1962. So it's got lots of illustrations. The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. So it was probably in the 60s I read this one. I watched the recent movie, but haven't reread this yet. First published 1894. Middlemarch by George Eliot. So I started reading this last year, but got set aside so I could read other books, and then when I got back to it, I was forgetting what I had already read, so I need to start back at the beginning. So it's interesting enough, but it's a big book, so it's easy to get distracted by other books. So sometimes I have to sit down and not allow any other distractions for 3 weeks to a month so I can read the whole thing. First published 1871 and 72. I think it's one of those books that was published in installments. Time and the Gods by Lord Dunsany. So I got this because Michael K. Vaughan says it's a great book to read. I don't know if I could believe his recommendations, was he thinks Lovecraft is one of the greatest writers ever, but I found Lovecraft stories to be very boring. So this is first published 1905, 1906, 1908, 1910, 1912, and 1916. So it's a collection of works that were originally published separately. Then Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. So I read this one back in the early 70s. So I discovered the science fiction section in the school library about 1971. So I've been reading science fiction ever since I discovered Tom Swift in about 1970. So this is copyright 1953. And this is graphic novel version of Fahrenheit 451 by Tim Hamilton. So I read this one recently. So it's probably good enough to give you a basic idea what the story's about. But really you need to reread this one. So that's all for this video. See you in the next one.